Hello, everybody. Welcome to In This Corner, the podcast 185, where we have certainly the greatest guest and great stories, great history. We do it all with a guy who knows a lot about all of that stuff. He is a writer. He is an author. He is a CompuBox counter. He is a historian. He's a good guy there in friendly West Virginia. Lee Groves. How you doing, Lee?
Doing well. And you?
Good, good. And you know, I don't get excited too much anymore about anything.
Okay.
Given my history, but was excited when we nailed down this guest because I've known him for a long time, and he is somebody that anybody who knows any damn thing about boxing, if they've been in the sport for over 20 years, if they don't know the name Bruce Trampler, they don't know boxing.
hmm
Uh, he's a guy that everybody knows of his tremendous work as a longtime Hall of Fame matchmaker with Top Rank Boxing. But a lot of people can't pick him out of a crowd, because he is sort of reclusive, if you will, in how he carries himself and purports himself behind the scenes. But he is, in my opinion, about as deep an insider as you can have in boxing and have on the program. And tell the folks what they're in store for with our guest, Bruce Trampler.
I am a big fan of excellence. And when it comes to excellence in his field, there are very few people that can match up to Bruce Trampler. And one of the things that struck me about his boxing life is just how versatile it's been. Aside from turning professional, he has worked just about every job that exists. He didn't become a professional boxer. He was not just a manager. He managed Billy Dynamite Douglas, the father of James Buster Douglas, he of the Mike Tyson knockout fame. He was an amateur boxer. He was an aspiring journalist. He was a trainer, a cornerman, a promoter, a publicist, a judge, and even a ring announcer. After all that, he chose to become a matchmaker, and in doing so, he's become one of the best who's ever done it. And because of all his experiences, this should be a very interesting and informative show.
So, need we say more? We're coming back with Bruce Trampler. Back in this corner, the podcast, and we're going to get right to it because I have a lot of stuff to talk about with this gentleman who is a Florida Boxing Hall of Famer, a Nevada Boxing Hall of Famer, an International Boxing Hall of Famer, and probably a lot of other Halls of Fame as well. And Lee went through matchmaker extraordinaire, trainer over the years, manager, publicist, boxed as an amateur. I call him not a Jack of all trades, but a Bruce of all trades. He is Bruce Trampler from Top Rank. Good to see you, Bruce.
Great to see you guys too.
Let's get right to it. I want you were born in Jersey. Am I right there?
Yes.
Okay. When and how did the boxing bug get a hold of Bruce Trampler?
I was in high school, and back in those days, we had newspapers that covered, they'd carry fight results. The Newark Star Ledger was near my hometown of Maplewood, and the Newark Evening News. And so I started, when I'm reading baseball box scores or whatever, I noticed fight results from Portland, Maine, or Beaumont, Texas, or around the country. And I had a wanderlust. I had a quest for travel. So I started logging these fights. I had seen fights on TV with my father and my grandfather back when they had Fight of the Week. And so I had the bug. I went to see my first fight, July of '67, was in the old Madison Square Garden, Joe Frazier against George Chuvalo. And shortly after that, I went out to school in Ohio. But while I was still in high school, we had our school library had a subscription to the Ring magazine.
Hmm.
So I would read that during study hall or whatever, and it just kind of grew. Trips to New York, I was only like 30 minutes outside New York City. I'd go to different gyms. I met a lot of fighters. I met Sandy Sadler, Sugar Ray Robinson, all retired, but good guys who were kind enough to talk to a young high school boxing fan, and everybody encouraged me. Nobody discouraged me. So it grew from there.
And a lot of that growth, a big part of it, had to do with this area right here. That is me with Muhammad Ali, and probably very early 1971. There I am as a 20-some-odd-year-old at the Fifth Street Gym, Miami Beach. Chris and Angelo Dundee had so much to do with the embryonic stages of your career. Bruce, tell us about that.
Well, from New Jersey in high school, I went 4 years to Ohio University, which isn't far from where Lee is. And
Athens, Ohio.
yeah. And I used to, we'd drive out to school a couple times a year. We'd come down the Ohio River from Wheeling. You were on the other side, but of the river, I mean. And so I did 4 years there. I had already been bitten by the boxing bug, so I became friendly with Don Elbaum, who was promoting fights in Cleveland and Akron and Detroit and
Erie.
Yeah, I never went to Erie, but Lima, Ohio. I stayed in Ohio for 4 years. Angelo Dundee brought a heavyweight named Rufus Brazel. Uh, he was from Lima, Ohio. Great guy. And so I met Angelo a few times. So now, upon graduation in 1971, I had gotten a teaching certificate. I was going to look for a job as either a sports writer or a school teacher. And Chris and Angelo called me, and they knew me from my college days, but they said, "Why don't you forget those jobs and come down here and we'll teach you how to be a promoter?" And Angelo, you'll be his protege, working corners, closing cuts. So it was a tough choice, but Miami Beach won out.
Talk about, for people that don't know, Chris Dundee. I think Chris, and he's in the Hall of Fame. I think he's on my short list of great boxing promoters. He also promoted wrestling there on Miami Beach. But talk about what you remember about your relationship with Chris Dundee.
Chris was several years older than Angelo. Chris really ran the show there. He had wrestling on Monday nights, boxing on Tuesday nights at the Miami Beach Auditorium, and on bigger shows at the Convention Hall, which is all in the same complex there on Washington Avenue. And Chris was driven. He was a brilliant man. He was always on the move, always thinking, and just a tremendous guy. Great promoter, great friend, wonderful guy to be associated with.
And him and Hank Kaplan actually found a few guys that I could beat, which was very difficult to do when I fought professionally with no amateur experience. What about Angelo Dundee? What are your? I'm sure you have a lot of memories with Angelo.
Yeah, nicest, sweetest guy in the world. Just a very compassionate man. Loved his fighters, loved boxing. Uh, I never heard anyone say a bad word about Angelo, and deservingly so. He was just a terrific guy.
Where do you rate, Bruce, the Fifth Street Gym in terms of the pantheon of great gyms, whether it be Gleason's or Johnny Tacos or others? Where do you rank the Fifth Street Gym? I mean, being down there in the early 70s with Louis Rodriguez and Florentino Fernandez and Bo Jacks over there. And I mean, it's just to me an amazing experience. And I must think that it was that way for you.
It was. I mean, you know, to come out of college and to start with the Dundee brothers in Miami Beach, it was just an incredible experience. If I could have scripted my life, I couldn't have come up with a better route to take. Learning from the best. Um, I graduated college, but I was a freshman in boxing, you might say, and every day I'd go to the office, and I'm working with Angelo Dundee and Chris Dundee, and every once in a while Muhammad Ali would drop into the office just to shoot the breeze, and as you know, every day at noon, Fifth Street Gym open. We'd go down there for a couple hours, watch the guys work out, take phone calls, run errands, whatever had to be done, and then back to the office to finish the day. It was an unbelievable experience.
Before I flip it to Lee to get into your years after that, you told me a great story about you and Ali, an airport story when I was with you recently. Why don't you tell that story, or is it a story we can tell?
Well, you tell me. You know the story.
Yeah. Well, you tell. I mean, when they're picking up Ali at the airport.
Yeah, we're at Fifth Street Gym, and I'd been there about a week. Um, and Angelo calls me over. He says, "Can you run out to the airport and pick up Muhammad?" Now, this is a guy who this was June of '71, so a few months earlier, very few months earlier, March. Ali had just fought that great fight of the century with Joe Frazier, and here he is coming back. Uh, in July, he's going to be fighting Jimmy Ellis, his longtime friend, um, at the Houston Astrodome. Anyway, he's coming down to finish training. So Angela sends me out to the airport, and in those days, there was no TSA security. You just park your car, walk down to the gate, and your arriving passengers are deplaning. And there's a lot of people waiting for the next flight. There's people getting off the flight from Louisville, and there's Muhammad Ali, and he's signing autographs, and you wait patiently for him to get done posing for pictures. He was so personable, so people friendly. And now it's my turn, so I walk up and introduce myself. You know, Bruce Trampler, Angelo sent me out to pick you up, and I thought it was going great till he balled up his fist, and he goes, "Did you just call me the N-word?" And I was horrified. I go, "What? What part of my name or Angelo's?" And he gives you that scowl, and everyone's looking at me like, "Did he really say that?" And anyway, then he gave you that big grin, and he put his arm around me. He said, "Let's go."
Yeah.
So that
As
was
I
my intro. When I saw him in the gym the next day, he said, "Did I get you in trouble or anything like that?" Because I was supposed to take him right to the gym under Angelo's orders, and he found a diversion at the airport, and very pretty stewardess. Well, not that pretty, really, but so when I got to the gym, Angelo goes, "Where's Muhammad?" And I said, "You're not going to believe this, but." And he said, "Oh, I'll believe it." And him and Chris started laughing. They'd been through that with Ellie before.
Lee.
Wow. In the opening segment, we went over your incredibly diverse boxing life. And after serving all those roles, you decided to devote your professional life, the majority of it, to matchmaking. What was it about matchmaking that made you say, yeah, I want to do this?
Well, during my college years, I would go home from Ohio back to New Jersey on spring break, Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, and I would go to meet Teddy Brenner, the legendary matchmaker at Madison Square Garden, and he like the Dundies, he kind of took me under his wing, and it was very helpful. But you had to earn it with Teddy Brenner.
Hmm.
For instance, he said to me, "What do you want to do with your life after you get out of college?" And again, this is pre going to you know, down to Miami Beach. I said, I either want to be a sports writer or a boxing matchmaker. And he said, newspapers and boxing, they're two dying businesses. Go find something else to do. And that was his challenge to me.
Hmm.
In other words, to see, do I really want to do this or not? And I did, and I have. Yeah.
Because you've done all these different jobs, you have a perspective that few others in the sport have. How has that perspective made you a better matchmaker?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. I think that it has, but when you're around the people I was around, the Chris Dundies, the Teddy Brenners, the Bob Arums, you either get better or you go do something else.
But having boxed, you had a better sense of styles. And in matchmaking, you have to match styles together. And I'm sure that in the ring perspective must have helped.
Yeah, it certainly didn't hurt. I mean, it may have hurt actually boxing, uh, but no, you're right. I think it's something that you. I mean, there's been good matchmakers who never boxed, and there's been good train. I mean, Angelo Dundee never boxed, but he was
True.
a pretty good trainer. Um, it's just something you either have a sense for or an instinct for, And don't forget, just being a matchmaker is a pretty broad general term. There's different kinds of matchmakers. There's those that find opponents for guys. There's those that work for a promoter who has television or in an area where they just promote club fights. You have to match up local fighters. There's all sorts of different forms of matchmaking and with different goals depending on who you work for. Or if you're a Don Elbaum, you work for yourself. You hustle and you scrape. Um, when you work for a Chris Dundee, a Bob Arum, a Teddy Brenner, I did 2 years at Madison Square Garden as well, and so it's you really learn on the job, and if you're smart, you keep learning and you keep getting better.
There are good matchmakers and then there are great ones like you. What traits separate the good from the great as far as matchmaking is concerned?
Well, again, it depends on your goal. If you work for instance, Teddy Brenner, when he hired me at Madison Square Garden, he said, "We're not into developing talent. We're into putting on the best fights possible for New York fans. They're the most sophisticated, knowledgeable fans, and they want to see good fights. If they want to bet on it, if they want to root for their local hero, but in the end, they want to have good fights." When Bob Arum hired Teddy Brenner and myself to the fledgling network ESPN, um, Bob had just signed 8 fighters to work with NBC Network called Tomorrow's Champions, and
Right.
they included Tony Ayala, Bernard Taylor, Davey Moore,
Bobby Ches?
Bobby Ches. So that was the first time when it was the return of televised fights. It was 2 weekends in Lake Tahoe, and we were trying to create heroes out of that guy. But to create heroes, they have to be in fights. You can't just give them guys that fall down. Good matchmaking enables the star of the show to win, but he has to earn it.
Right.
And so that's how we went from the philosophy at Madison Square Garden, just put on great fights. And if there's upsets, there's upsets. That's even better. Um, to developing heroes that, with regular television, which ESPN was at the time. They want to see different guys fight, and they want to see them, 3, 4, 5 times a year. So they have to be in good fights. They have to do good interviews afterward. You're developing them as personalities. You're looking at their ability and their marketability. And I mean, just talent alone doesn't mean people are going to watch you fight just because you happen to be very skilled. You have to be entertaining, which is what boxing is. It's entertainment because everyone goes home on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and they have their pick of other sports. They can watch movies. They can watch TV shows. Why would they watch boxing? There has to be somebody on the tube that night that they're looking forward to see. And that's what we try to do, is develop heroes that people want to see
Absolutely.
in good fights.
What are some of the more common mistakes that young matchmakers make?
Um, I think probably the most glaring thing is you have a prospect and you get them knocked off.
Hmm.
You overmatch them. You don't want to undermatch guys because there's nothing worse than bad fights or stinky fights. But if you got a young kid coming out and you put him in with a veteran who's too tough or who has a style that's not suitable for developing your prospect, you're going to get him beat. He might get discouraged and quit, or fans might lose interest in him. So it's a matter of timing. It's a matter of development uh, at the right pace for a kid. If you move him too fast, too quickly, he may fall by the wayside. And if you do it just right, you get lucky, he develops into a hero, and you know that's your job.
You mentioned, before I go back to you, you mentioned that luck word, and luck does play a role in it. You made me think of where boxing, we certainly think of it as an individual sport, but at its best, with a company like Top Rank, that's why they've been around so long. There is a team concept to it, in that you have a Bruce Trampler, you also have Bob Arum, and then you have the trainers. And then, is there a lot of, and have you been involved with a lot of camaraderie when you're bringing up a fighter, talking to the trainer, talking to Bob, and figuring out, when do we make that move and who do we make it against? Is that something that still goes on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a collaborative process. You deal with the team of each fighter, the manager, the trainer, um, the advisor, the lawyer. Everyone's got a different situation, but in the end, um, all we can do is offer fights to uh, the team, and in the end, they decide if they want to accept it or not. And the boxer and his team have every right to uh, object to an opponent. It's not the right style. It's not enough money to fight this guy. It's it's a little too soon in our career. Whatever they decide in the end, like Teddy Brenner used to get accused of knocking off upcoming heroes. Like Customato used to yell at him, "You got Floyd Patterson beat," and Teddy by Joey Maxim, and Teddy said, "Well, wait a second, Cuss, I offered you the fight and you accepted it. So who got him beat?
Hmm.
You could have said no." And typically, matchmakers do get blamed when a hero gets beat. Oh, you gave him the wrong guy. Well, you took the fight, so you must have thought it was the right guy.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
goes back and forth like that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to take the blame, and
Yeah.
in the end, you know, if we do our job right, we have a star on our hands, and people want to see him. And it's not necessarily championship caliber. I mean, uh, we've all seen the trilogy, Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward, just great fights. if you'd never watched boxing before, you'd become a boxing fan watching Ward and Gotti go at it. And that's what makes heroes, guys who fight their heart out, who nonstop action. You can be very skilled and stink the place out. You can be very lacking in skill and sell the place out.
You know what? It's a great point bringing those guys up because I remember a guy I know you remember, and we both probably miss him so much, is Colonel Bob Sheridan. He
Yeah.
used to always say, the Colonel would say, it's those intangibles that you can't see until you see him. A guy might have a great jab, might have a great right hand, might have a great left hook, but it's that stuff that you don't see until you see it. The chin or the heart or the endurance and those intangibles. Is there something that Bruce Trampler looks for when advising perhaps Bob to sign somebody? Is there something you look at right from the get-go that maybe is a little different from just his physical or her physical attributes?
Yeah, if you'd asked me this question 50 years ago when I started, I wouldn't have been able to answer properly. But over the decades, we've refined our answer to ability and marketability. You can have a lot of ability and be skilled and win titles, but nobody really, cares. Um, if you have a lot of marketability, um, people will want to see you. This guy is funny. He does backflips after he wins. He gives great interviews, but maybe the skills aren't there. But when you get ability and marketability, a real good fighter who people want to see, that's when you get a star, a Sugar Ray Leonard, a Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., um, a Mike Tyson, a Johnny Tapia. The people who put fans in the seats attract viewers for TV and are winners on top of that in the ring. That's what you're striving for.
Lee?
One of the scariest scenarios for matchmakers are last minute fallouts because it's up to the matchmaker to fill that vacancy and it's got to be filled. What goes through your mind when you get that phone call, and what's the process that you go through to fill that gap?
Well, we all get ulcers and stress out a lot. It used to be we would do weigh-ins on the day of the fight, so you never wanted the phone to ring that morning. You didn't even want to answer it because somebody got sick, somebody is overweight, somebody's not going to fight that night. So you take the call, you deal with it, you get out your phone book, you keep a list of guys who might be in a gym. If you're in New York, you might reach out as far as Philadelphia or Washington, D.C., somebody who can get there that day. Now that we do weigh-ins the day before the fight, it gives you a little more flexibility. But yeah, fighters do pull out. They do get arrested. They do
Oh my
have a
God.
fight with their wife. Whatever. Fighters are human. Things happen.
Is there a last minute save for which you are most proud?
I'll tell you one that it has nothing to do with being proud, but it has to do with hustling.
Okay.
We did a fight in Atlantic City at the Sands Hotel, and we're on TV. It's an ESPN show, and one of the fighters balked in the dressing room. He balked. He said, "I'm not fighting."
Oh boy.
And what are we gonna do, right? So there was another fighter in the dressing room talking to one of the kids on the card, and he said, "What's going on?" I said, "This guy just pulled out." And he said, "Well, I'll fight." They were both heavyweights. And I said, "Are you sure?" So he says, "Yeah, absolutely. I didn't bring my gear, but if we can grab me, trunks and a cup and shoes." So this was in the 80s. I confirmed with the other side that he would fight this kid, and I ran out to the ringside. I talked to the commissioner, the late Jersey Joe Walcott, who was commissioner in New Jersey, And I said, Joe, or I said, Champ, we got a problem here. And he said, is it a good fight? I said, yeah. And the other guy has been training? I said, yeah. He said, do it. So I ran back up, and they fought a 6-round draw. One of them was Mike the Bounty Hunter was the guy who filled in.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
Not surprising. Very difficult guy to fight, Mike the Bounty
Yeah.
Hunter. One of the
Yeah.
strangest styles I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
Finally, for this segment, is there a match that you wanted to have made but never got the chance to make it?
Yeah. I wanted to do Oscar De La Hoya against Terry Norris, and we had already committed to another fight for Terry Norris that his management wanted. And I tried to talk them out of it. I went to Bob Arum. He said they're not going to switch. I said, well, if that fight goes off, Terry Norris is going to get beat, and we'll lose the De La Hoya fight, which was a huge fight at the time. And Terry did lose the fight, and so we never got to do Norris versus the Golden Boy.
Wow, interesting story. We'll take a quick break, come back with more Hall of Fame matchmaker Bruce Trampler on In This Corner. More right after this. Back on In This Corner, the podcast. Great stuff with Bruce Trampler from Top Rank. Lee?
You know, you've worked closely with so many prominent people and Hall of Fame fighters, and because of that, you've had access to those people that few have ever enjoyed. I'm going to mention some of those people, and when I do, can you tell us a story that illustrates something that we might not already know about them? And the first name I'm going to bring up is Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, Floyd turned pro for us, and we did, I think, his first 27 fights, something like that. I'd have to look it up. Yeah, terrific talent. He turned pro for us in Las Vegas at Texas Station Casino, and after the fight, Top Rank President Todd DeBuff, we looked at each other. Now, Todd had gone out and recruited him and signed him. He goes, what do you think? I said, this guy's going to be really special. You know, sometimes guys have great debuts and they don't live up to what they showed initially. Floyd got better and better. He was a terrific fighter.
Uh, did you see the difference between Pretty Boy at the beginning of his career and Money later on in his career? Was there a change in the man as well as the fighter?
No, I don't think the fighter changed because he was a very good amateur. Although I think his last amateur fight that I saw in person, he got beat here in Vegas. But you could tell the potential was there. As a young man starting out, you know, his dad, Big Floyd, was incarcerated, and Roger was handling things. His uncle, Roger, the Black Mamba. But Floyd developed. He became a pretty savvy businessman. As a fighter, he had a certain style that worked very well for him, and he became a big attraction and a Hall of Fame fighter.
Oscar De La Hoya.
The Golden Boy was, it's funny. We didn't do his very first fight. He turned pro at the Inglewood Forum in Los Angeles, and then we picked him up and did a huge number of fights with him as well. Great kid, great fighter. A lot of fun to be around. Huge attraction, as we saw. The definition of ability and marketability.
Yep.
I was about to say that.
And still we still have a great relationship. He's terrific.
Johnny Tapia.
Mi vida loca.
Johnny was an original. He came out of the 505, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Overcame a horrific childhood. Mother murdered, father murdered. Uh, Wonderful fighter, wonderful attraction, a real people person, engaged with fans. He would walk into an arena on a night he wasn't fighting, and by the main event, he hugged almost everyone, every fan who wanted a picture or an autograph, or he'd give out his phone number to people. Hey, give me a call, bro, if you have any problems, if I can help you. You know, uh, if you have a flat tire, I'll come help you fix it. He was just such a giving, big-hearted, warm-hearted person.
Lee, before you go on, Lee, he is the definition of what you hear me say all the time, Johnny, about fighters. The most common yet uncommon of all athletes.
That's
Johnny fits that. Go ahead, Lee. Sorry.
Erik Morales.
El Terrible. He came out of the La Zona Norte in Tijuana, Mexico, really rough area. Just his dad at the time, his late father, was his trainer. He was promoted by Fernando Beltran and Zanfer, and an incredibly nice guy, good person. Fought some incredible fights with Manny and with Barrera, and just a super person.
Big George Foreman.
Big George, the closest thing I can imagine to if Jesus Christ was on earth today. He started out as a horrible person who became the most wonderful, giving, nicest, kindest guy in the world. Came out of the Fifth Ward in Houston, a thug who ended up. I used to love going to his church services in Houston. Uh, he was the minister when my wife and I got married. Just a real person who cared about people. Obviously, loved God, loved everyone, and just you couldn't create a better person, human being than George Foreman.
You had a lot to do with his comeback that ultimately ended with him winning the heavyweight championship 20 years after he lost it. And yet he treated himself as a beginning fighter. He started with Steve Zowski and he built up and built up and built up. How challenging was it to find the correct fighters to fight George so that he would learn something and yet he would advance his cause?
You know, George had a great sense of humor. So the first fight I put him in, I'd gone to Springfield, Missouri to scout him. Because initially, if you remember his comeback, he was old and fat, and everyone made jokes about him. And I couldn't even talk Bob Arum into giving him a shot. And so I went to Springfield, Missouri. He fought a real tough puncher, a southpaw named Bobby Crabtree.
Yes.
And I didn't really know George at that point, and someone came out and said George is in the limo outside. He wants to talk to you. I said George Foreman wants to talk to me. Wow, you know. So I got in the car, and it's just him and me, and I see there's no escape, but I don't know what he's got on his mind. And he goes, "Tell me who I'm fighting tonight." And I said, "Well, you know who you're fighting. You signed a." He goes, "But I don't know anything about him." I said, well, Crabtree's from Arkansas. He's a tough hillbilly, uh, good puncher, dropped Ronaldo Snipes, um, left-hander, and George, his face clouded over. He said, he's a southpaw?
Mm.
And nobody told me that. And now in my mind, I'm going, he is a southpaw, isn't it? It's kind of like when Muhammad Ali accused me of calling him a certain name.
Yeah.
Now I'm saying, am I right? Isn't he a southpaw? And he goes, okay. He goes, thank you. You can go. Nice meeting you. And that was that, I thought. After the fight, he says, I want to come out to Vegas and meet Mr. Arum and talk about. So I went back to Vegas. I told Bob, and he goes, forget about him. He's old, fat. I said, no, he's serious. He wants to fight. So I put him in with Rocky Sikorsky from
Mhm.
Minnesota. And first round, George is flailing away. And at the end of the round, he walks back to his corner, and I'm sitting right at the ring, right below his corner. And he leans over. He said, I'm out of gas. I can't go any longer. And I said, oh my God, I got George Foreman beat, right? But he was kidding. He winked at me, just like Ali winked at me. He didn't, after he put me on the spot, right? Uh, George winked at me, and it, it it went well after that. And he was persistent. Remember, he lost to Holyfield in his first shot at regaining the title. He lost to Tommy Morrison for the WBO title, and he just wouldn't give up. He said, I'm gonna win the title, and then I'm gonna retire." And as I recall, he was way behind against Michael
A
Moore.
southpaw, a southpaw.
Yeah, and he threw that.
It
I call,
happened.
yeah, it happened. I call it a Hail Mary. George always said I was just setting him up. You shouldn't have worried about it. And I would when he threw that bomb at Moore, nothing against Michael Moore, but it was the most exciting sports throw I've ever had.
Man, third time's the charm for
Yep.
George. Final name, Bob Arum.
Bob Arum is, people, for years I've read criticism of him, I've read praise about him, but those were all addressed to him as the greatest promoter ever. A kind, gentle, very well-read, erudite man who um, he reads every book, he watches every movie that comes out. He's he's kind of private, but he's so smart, and he's beyond smart. He's so intelligent. Um, and he's very, I mean, he does things for people, fighters in need. uh, he performs services and acts that don't get publicity, and he doesn't seek any publicity. And just and he's a historian. He's 94 now. Just had a very critical knee replacement. Doctors didn't even want to operate him at his age, but he was bone on bone. He was in terrible pain, and he didn't want to go on living with that pain where he couldn't walk. And this was right around the recent holidays. And he's recovered now. They finally found a doctor who would, sign off on putting Bob under at 94. Did
Mhm.
the operation, and he's up and at him again, and
Amazing.
just in time for our new deal with DAZN.
Wow. You and Smitty share some similarities. You both have been inducted into the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You've both been inducted into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. And you're a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and Smitty hosts the annual
Yes.
weekend.
Yeah.
And he hopes to be inducted someday soon. I think he deserves it.
Yep.
You were part of the class of 2010 that included Danny Little Red Lopez,
Yeah.
Junku Chang, Shelley Finkel, Larry Hazard,
Yeah.
Howard Cosell, Ed Schuyler, Wilfred Sauerland. Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when you got the call from the hall that you got inducted?
Yeah. It was my first year on the ballot, and uh, the Ed Brophy, who I knew but didn't know him, much more than hello and goodbye. Uh, he called out of nowhere. I didn't know how the process worked. I didn't know, and he said, "Listen, I'm going to tell you something that you're not to repeat." And I said, "Well, what could this?" It didn't even occur to me what he was calling me about.
Hmm.
And he said, "I want to congratulate you on your selection or election." I said, wow, I didn't. He said, but you can't tell anyone. I said, that's not fair. He said, we're going to announce it in a couple days. He said, just sit on it. I'd appreciate it. And so I did.
How hard was it to keep quiet?
Oh, it was very hard. I mean, you know, uh, you don't, initially you don't think about something like the Hall of Fame. Then when you actually, when it's dropped on you that you're going to be inducted, you say, "Wow!" You flash back over all your decades in the sport and all the fighters that fought for you and all the managers that you negotiated with and all the media people that you interacted with, and it kind of hits you like it's a shock, but it's a good shock.
It was so good this a few years ago to see Brad Goodman inducted, into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. When I moved to Vegas from Florida, so many different venues I'd walk into, and he'd come up to me and say, "Jimbo, what do you think of this fighter? Jimbo, watch this fighter." And then when I
Yeah.
started doing fights as a commentator, he would even come over to me during the fights, and I think there will be more from Top Rank. It's one of everybody that really knows boxing. I was thinking about my good friend Gordon Hall. We were talking about it the other day. There've been a lot of great promoters, and there's been a lot of great promotional companies in boxing, but I really do think that Top Rank is at the top with the way they've handled everything in business and sport, and handling people. You are a tremendous part of that. I'm going to end this with you how I end it with fighters on my television show In This Corner, but I'll switch the words a little bit to how does Bruce Trampler want to be remembered as a matchmaker and, more importantly, as a man?
It's not something you walk around thinking about, but if I keeled over today, I would like people to say he was a man of his word. He didn't BS people. He shot straight with them, and he gave it his best.
And the best has led you to a lot of success in a sport that is very, very difficult to survive in. You've survived in it. You've thrived in it. Any thoughts on retirement?
No,
Yeah.
you retired. You retire when you're tired of working, and I really love the business. I love the people I work with, and I really enjoy it. And when you think back that to set out on, I made my first match in January of 1968. And it went so quickly that, the time passed so quickly. But it enabled me to see the world. It enabled me to work with wonderful people. I actually met my wife after a Johnny Tapia fight in Phoenix, and so you could say that was the best match I ever made, was meeting Laura. And no, it just went by so quickly. However many years that's been, I'd like to do this, keep going about the same amount more.
Well, I didn't get to know you. I didn't get to know you back in the early 70s. I was only 10 or 11 years old. You weren't that much older than me, but I'm glad over the years that I've gotten to know you, and I've admired your work from afar. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on In This Corner. Always a pleasure, man.
Thank you.
Maybe if you ever make a comeback as a fighter, we'll find the right opponent for you.
Can you find somebody not a southpaw either? No southpaws. Bruce Trampler. We're going to come back and wrap things up on In This Corner. You can find somebody to beat at 67 years of age.
Well, I'll give Lee a call, and he'll be your manager.
We'll be right back. Great stuff there with Bruce Trampler from Top Rank. You can get an idea why that company, Top Rank, along with the Bob Arums and the Brad Jacobs and the Brad Goodmans, and they've been so successful. But it does make you think about the intricacies of matchmaking. You get a fighter, let's say even a guy that had a heck of an amateur career, and you start his career, and how do you bring him along, and how do you better a fighter by putting him or her against different styles, and when do you know they're ready to really step them up, and if that doesn't work, how do you bring them back down? What about the older fighter, and that you're trying to get him or her a couple of final paychecks, or perhaps one more run at a title. And then you've got a case like a George Foreman, and look what he did. And then you have one like Ayala, who came back after all those years from prison, and it didn't work out so well. Of course,
Right.
the difference in the character of the men of Foreman and Ayala, a big difference there. But Lee, what I'm saying long-windedly is that it's not just what you think. Oh, you fighter A, fighter B. No, there's all kinds of decisions that have to be made. And when you're signing fighters, what he said, about ability and marketability, and he brought up, character, obviously, that's something as well. Good stuff. And you can see why Trampler is certainly on the short list of the great matchmakers of all time.
Well, I mean, it's fitting given his resume and given his accomplishments that he works for Top Rank, because he is the top rank of
Yeah.
matchmakers.
Yeah, the top Bob's been around 60 years. I think Top Rank first came into existence, I believe, in 1973.
Correct.
And of course, at that point, Bruce was, coming off the Miami stint. But yeah, great stuff. And that's why this business, we say, it is a small world, boxing, global sport, but a small world. He mentioned Don Elbaum, and I had such a great time. I was so happy when a guy like Elbaum got into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, because he has some similarities to me in that he's kind of done it his own way. Elbaum,
Yes.
kind of a renegade of sorts. He was.
Yes, he
And
was.
and again, did it an outlier, but yet still a brilliant matchmaker like Trampler. But certainly not an interesting career that leads to probably a lot of antacids or Malox when you're in that business. Any final words?
He held up well under all those years and all that stress. He's come out the other side very, very well. And I thoroughly enjoyed having him on. You always learn something from somebody like him who's been in the business for so many years.
Yeah, and I've got other questions here that we weren't able to get to, but we will get him back on. And actually, maybe we can dig even deeper into the fistic
How he
art
does what he does.
of matchmaking. In this corner of the podcast, we want to thank Bruce Trampler. He's Lee Groves. So long, everybody.